Give the call to the member for Dunkley.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this legislation on behalf of all the men and women in Dunkley who want to be able to progress their careers and also have a family. I rise to speak on this legislation on behalf of all of the men, but predominantly the women who work in childcare and early education and want to be able to pursue a career which sets up our children to have the best future possible. But before I turn to this legislation and to those people, I want to put on the record how proud it makes me to have colleagues and friends in this place who are walking the talk. In this term of parliament alone, remembering that we aren't even 2 years into this term, the members for Lilley and Canberra and Jagga and Bendigo and Kingston have all had babies and have all come back to work, both in their electorates and in this parliament, in order to stand up for their constituents and for people across the country. And we're very much looking forward to Senator Smith and the member for Bendigo, who will be coming back soon. Senator Smith has had her baby, and the member for Bendigo may well be giving birth as I speak. Right now. So, we all know that you don't have to have children in order to understand deeply how important it is to make sure that we have a childcare and early education system that sets up children for the future and that allows men and women who are still predominantly the caregivers to get back to work and have a career. You don't have to have children to understand that, to fight for it, to be passionate about it. But it doesn't hurt to have in the ranks of a party of government people that are living that experience. And I want to put on the record of Hansard that I am assisted every day by my friends and colleagues, the women who have given birth and are fighting like nothing else, even though they are often so exhausted they have to put toothpicks in their eyes to keep them open, to make sure that life is just a bit easier for other women and families. This is a government, the Morrison government, that likes to talk about jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Very rarely do we hear them, if ever, talk about jobs in the early education and childcare sector. Very rarely, if ever, do we hear them talking about an industry which is predominantly staffed by women and which is chronically underpaid. We hear them talking about the industry when they think that they can fool parents across the country that they have the answer for escalating childcare fees. We heard them talk about the early education and childcare industry last year when the first industry, the first workers to have JobKeeper ripped away from them were early education and childcare workers. But there is a resounding silence, a little bit like the Prime Minister's response to the march of thousands and thousands and thousands of women on Monday, when it comes to talking about the pay and condition of the workers. So, like my colleagues on this side of the chamber, I want to take this opportunity to thank every single early educator and childcare worker in my electorate who go to work every day to care for and educate other people's children, and do so for chronic underpay because it is a feminised industry. And to promise you that the fight is not over, to make sure that you are valued economically and in the way you deserve, with the praise that you should get by a government that hears you and sees you. Sometimes it feels like the Morrison government doesn't implement really great progressive policies because Labor advocates for them. Or sometimes the Morrison government doesn't accept the problems exist because we're the ones pointing them out. So in this speech, I want to rely Firstly, on the Productivity Commission, which is an agency or an institution that often the Morrison government and Conservative governments like to turn to for advice. But yet again, it would seem in this case they like to turn to it for advice when it says what they want to hear, but not otherwise. Because we know that the Productivity Commission in 2019 put out a report on government services that showed that childcare costs are locking Australian parents out of the workforce. We know that the data reveals that almost 300,000 Australians are not in the labour force due to caring for children, which is an increase of 5.9%. That really matters. Jobs, as we all know, are not just about earning money. Earning money is really important, particularly for a lot of those low-income families that are locked out of the workforce with the second earner because they can't pay for childcare costs. But it's not just about money. Work is about dignity. It's often about worth. It's often about feeling like you're contributing to your community, to your country, to the world around you, as well as to your family. And when people are locked out of the workforce because they also want to have a family, that's just not right. It's fundamentally wrong. And that's why it needs to be fixed. You know, numbers of parents saying they're not working, mainly due to the cost of childcare, has skyrocketed by 23%. Australian parents are really struggling to work the hours that they want to work, and it's not financially healthy, it's not healthy for people's mental health, it's often not healthy for people's physical health, and it needs to be changed. And that's why Labor has a policy to make childcare affordable for Australians. Now, when the median cost of childcare soared by 5.6% in a year from 2019 to 2020 to almost $523 a week, we know we have a problem in terms of fairness and equity and access. $523 a week might not seem very much to a lot of people in this chamber on the other side, or to people out there who are lucky enough to have had the opportunities in life to obtain a high-paying job. But I can tell you, for people in my electorate, $523 a week is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. The Morrison government itself predicts that childcare fees will well outstrip CPI for years to come. So action needs to be taken, and it needs to be taken now. And I mentioned Labor's plan for childcare. And it is a well-crafted and well-thought-out plan. We'll scrap the $10,560 childcare subsidy cap, because that's what often sees women losing money from an extra day's work. We will lift the maximum childcare subsidy rate to 90%, and we would increase childcare subsidy rates and taper them for every family earning less than $530,000. And importantly, we would task the ACCC to design a price regulation mechanism to shed light on costs and fees and drive them down for good. And an Albanese federal Labor government would listen to the recommendations of the ACCC, unlike what this Morrison government is doing with Productivity Commission and other reviews. Core reviews, like, for example, the sex discrimination at the workplace review carried out by Human Rights Commissioner, but then don't leave them sitting on your desk for a year and not do anything about them until you're at the centre of a national maelstrom about sexual harassment in the workplace, just for example. Like many of my colleagues on this side of the chamber, I received call after call and email after email from families and from childcare providers last year during the pandemic, beside themselves about how they were going to be able to go to work if they couldn't pay the childcare fees or their childcare centre couldn't stay open, and from workers and providers who couldn't understand why It was their industry that was being picked on by the Morrison government to strip away JobKeeper. And they told me in a Zoom meeting that I held in August of last year that even before the pandemic there were issues in the sector. Affordability of fees, low pay for educators that I've spoken about. But that the pandemic and the economic recession that came with it have made addressing problems with access to childcare and insecure employment across the industry even more important. And one of the questions I was asked in the forum, which the state member for Carrum, Sonia Kilkenny, also attended because she is so hardworking and cares so much about women and children and their future, was a question from Kylie, which was, how can we get the government to respect our industry? You know you're in trouble as a government when people working ask, how can we get the government to respect our industry? And the first answer for Kylie, and the most obvious answer, is replace the current Morrison government with an Albanese Labor government at the next election, which has a genuine plan for childcare fees and for childcare workers. That's what we need to do. And as I go around my electorate, as I've had the privilege to do since the restrictions have been lifted, and I visit Lang Park Early Learning Centre and Kindergarten, the Lyrebird Community Centre Occasional Care Program, Frankston House of Learning Sanctuary, soon to open another one in Seaford, most recently Peninsula Grammar 3- and 4-year-old kindergarten, I will continue to bring two messages. One is everyone who works in early childhood education and care deserves to be treated better by their federal government. And the second is, I hear you, parents. You need to be able to afford childcare so that you can get back to work, you can further your career and you can look after your families. And I'll be continuing to fight for you every opportunity I get.